Hey guys, it's Chris Boyan here, and for a while I've been wanting to do a bookshelf tour. Um, I've been meaning to do it for a while, and someone in the comments actually suggested that I do a bookshelf tour, so I thought, okay, yeah, now's the time. Yeah, so this is my bookshelf. There's a quick overview, and there's some stuff on top. Um, but yeah, so I'm going to take everything off the shelves and I'm just going to sit down and show you guys every single book I have in this shelf. So, also, I had to let my cat in because she does not like my door being closed. Usually, when I'm filming a video, I close my door just for it to be more quiet. And she likes to scratch on the door. Yeah, she doesn't like doors being closed. Okay, so I don't know how long this video is going to be, so I guess brace yourselves. So first of all, up here I have the special editions of Diary of a Wimpy Kid and Dork Diaries, the special Cheesiest edition and the Super Squee edition. And if you're asking which one I prefer the Super Squee edition of Dork Diaries. Not because I like the book itself more, but because I just like the new things they've added in the Super Squee edition compared to the special Cheesiest edition. Alright, so first off is my miscellaneous shelf. I call it that just because these books don't really fit in with the rest of these books, so I just put them up top. And if you're wondering why that amiibo is there, I don't collect amiibos anymore. I'm just using that to hold up these books because they're constantly falling over. So first up is Spider-Girl Volume 1. I did read this, and it's pretty fantastic. Yeah, so just to let you guys know, most of these are Spider-Man related books because I collect a lot of Spider-Man comic books, and yeah. Spider-Girl Volume 2, which I have not read yet. I plan to sometime. Next up is Spider-Man Blue, which is a graphic novel that I very much enjoyed. If you're a Spider-Man fan, then I would definitely recommend getting this. I wasn't even planning on getting it for my shelf. I mean, I was in chapters one day, and I just happened to stumble across it. And I heard it was pretty good, so I picked it up, and I did make a good choice because, oh my god, like, this is probably in my top 10 of Spider-Man graphic novels. It's really, really great. Next up is Spider-Man Noir, the complete collection. Some of you will recognize him from the animated movie, which was fantastic, by the way. But the comic is really good, too. It's very different compared to the one in the animated movie. It's very dark. Probably one of the more dark stories in the Spider-Man universe or whatever. But yeah, just let you guys know, I'm not going to go into detail with these because I don't want this video to be too long. So I'm just going to kind of state my opinion and move on. Next up is some novels that I have. This one is Spider-Man Hostile Takeover. It is the official prequel to the PS4 game, which I loved, and the book is pretty good too. Spider-Man Forever Young is another novel, and I recently finished reading this, and it was actually really good. I very much enjoyed it. My next novel here is Spider-Man Kraven's Last Hunt, which is an adaptation of the Kraven's Last Hunt graphic novel, which I will show you later. But yeah, I have not read this yet. I'm planning on reading it sometime. Next up are my Halloween novelizations. This is the novelization of the first film, the second film, and the third movie. I don't have the fourth movie because it is expensive as shit. Every time I look at prices, it's always like $200 or more. It's absolutely insane. So yeah, it's probably very unlikely that I'll be able to get the fourth novelization. However, I did get the novelization for the 2018 film. I did finish reading this last night, actually, and it was a pretty good read. Yeah, it's exactly how the film is, and yeah. Next up is Smile. I'm gonna go fast on these next books because you guys already know my opinion for these books, so yeah. Drama, Sisters, The Babysitter's Club, Christie's Great Idea, The Truth About Stacy, Marion Saves the Day, Claudia and Mean Janine, Ghosts. If you're wondering why Ghosts is coming after the 4th Babysitter's Club book, I like to put my shelf in release order, not in chronological order. I know a lot of people won't agree with me on that, but yeah, that's just the way I do my shelf. The Babysitter's Club 5, Dawn and the Impossible 3. Book 6, Christie's Big Day. Share Your Smile, which I haven't yet talked about yet. Basically, this book is about how Raina did her books, wrote her books, sorry. And, yeah, it's very informative. I would definitely recommend it if you're a fan of Raina. And, yeah. And, of course, the newest Babysitter's Club, Boy Crazy Stacy, which I didn't like. Sunny Side Up, Swing It Sunny, Awkward, Brave, Crush, Invisible Emmy, one of my favorite books of all time, Positively Izzy, and Just Jamie. Real Friends, a book that I will highly, highly recommend once again. This is an amazing book. If you've seen my review, then you know I love this book. Yeah, it's probably up there with one of my favorite books of all time. I would also highly recommend the sequel, Best Friends. It's pretty great as well. Next up, moving on to Diary of Wimpy Kid, the classic that started it all. Roderick Rules, The Last Straw, Dog Days, The Ugly Truth, The Wimpy Kid Do-It-Yourself book, the newest edition, Cabin Fever, The Movie Diary, The Third Wheel, Hard Luck, The Long Haul, Old School. Next up is this abomination, The Other Movie Diary, The Getaway, and The Meltdown. And last, but certainly least, Diary Not Friendly Kid. The classic Dork Diaries, Tales from a Not-So-Fabulous Life. Second book, third book, not saying the full title because Dork Diaries books have very long titles and I don't want this video to be longer than it actually is. How to Dork Your Diary, Book 4, Book 5, Book 6, my personal favorite sequel, OMG All About Me Diary, Dork Diaries 7, Dork Diaries 8, probably the most underrated in my opinion, Dork Diaries 9, Dork Diaries 10, The Misadventures of Max Crumbly, Locker Hero, Book 11, Max Crumbly 2, Dork Diaries 12, Dork Diaries 13, and the newest installment, Max Crumbly 3. Next up, we move on to some more comic books, more Spider-Man. The rest of this is just Spider-Man stuff, just warning you. Venom Lethal Protector, The Enemy Within, Separation Anxiety, Carnage Unleashed, Along Came a Spider, Tooth and Claw, Venom by Daniel Way, the complete collection, Venom vs. Carnage, the Agent Venom series, Volume 1, and Volume 2, and the one by Colin Bunn, which is technically the third volume. Venom Space Knight, Agent of the Cosmos, Space Knight Enemies and Allies, Carnage, the one that got away. Just to let you guys know, I do not like Carnage as a character. I don't think he's interesting, and Venom is way better than Carnage, and you can fight me on that. Carnage World Tour, and the third volume, What Dwells Beneath. By the way, this is a pretty cool cover. Venom Volume 1, Homecoming, Venom The Land Before Crime, Edge of Venomverse, which was horrible, as well as Venomverse, which was also horrible. Venom Lethal Protector, Volume 3, Blood in the Water. I don't know why it says Lethal Protector. Venom and X-Men Poison X. Venomized, which was also horrible. Venom Volume 4, The Nativity. And starting the most recent series, which is Volume 1, Rex. Venom First Host. And the most recent one that I own, Venom Volume 2, The Abyss, which was pretty good. Spider-Man 2099, Classic Volume 1. Yeah, in case you guys didn't know, Spider-Man 2099 is my favorite alternate version of Spider-Man. Peter Parker 616 is probably my favorite, but Miguel O'Hara is my second favorite. Volume 2, Volume 3, Volume 4, and Volume 5, which is the most recent classic volume. Please release Volume 6, because I would very much like that. And then the series that started after that, which is Volume 1, Out of Time. The Spider-Verse tie-in. The newest series, which is actually called Volume 3 for some odd reason, Smack to the Future. Volume 4, Gods and Women. Volume 5, Civil War 2. Volume 6, Apocalypse Soon, and Volume 7, fix that, okay, Back to the Future Shock. By the way, for this series, Miguel did get a new armor costume, so, I don't know, maybe you guys can tell me in the comments which costume you like better. I personally enjoy the, old red and black. Yes, you might be thinking that's blue. It's actually black. It's meant to be black, and, yeah, you can fight me on that. Next up, we got Spider-Woman, Agent of S.W.O.R.D., which Jessica drew is probably one of my favorite Spider-Women. Volume 2, New Duds, and then the most recent series started, Volume 1, Baby Talk. Spider-Women, which was a crossover between the Silk, Spider-Gwen, and Spider-Woman books. By the way, if you want to know my ranking of these three Spider-Women, Silk is my least favorite, and Spider-Woman is my favorite. Volume 2, Civil War 2. And the most recent one, lopsided again, Scare Tactics. By the way, please make more Spider-Woman books. I would very much appreciate that. Next up is the Silk comic books, The Life and Times of Cindy Moon. I really don't like Silk. I don't like her character. And I might be getting into a tangent right now, but one of my main reasons why I don't like the character of Silk is because her powers make no sense to me. For those of you who don't know, Silk was bitten by the same spider as Peter Parker. And you can kind of figure out that Peter Parker did not have the power to spin webs. And apparently Silk does. Peter Parker made mechanical web shooters, and Silk just has organic webs, which makes absolutely no sense because they were bitten by the same spider. They also have different sets of powers. Like, they have the same sets of powers, but they work differently. Like, one spider's sense is better, and one's speed is better, and one's agility is better, whatever. And it bothers me. That makes absolutely no sense. And apparently, look at her costume. Like, this is... You got, like, red on there, right? And black, white, whatever. Guess what? Those are actually made out of her own webs. That does not make any sense at all, because... like, what? Why is her webs... Why does her webs turn black and red for certain parts of the costume? Like, it... yeah, that's one of the it's a big reason why I hate Silk, is because her powers make absolutely no sense. Anyway, moving on, Volume 1, Sinister, Volume 2, The Negative, and Volume 3, The Clone Conspiracy, which is thankfully the last volume. I hope they don't make any more of this. That would be very much appreciated, thank you. Next up is my Spider-Gwen books. This is Volume 0, Most Wanted. I'm not the biggest fan of Spider-Gwen. I definitely get the appeal. I just personally am not that big of a fan. I do like most of the books that she has, but it's just the character itself I'm not a big fan of. I just don't like how she's Gwen Stacy in another universe when, you know, the main Gwen Stacy is dead. I don't know, it's hard to explain, but it's kind of weird. And it just makes the death of Gwen Stacy kind of seem not as big anymore because Gwen Stacy's alive in another universe. Volume 1, Greater Power, Weapon of Choice, Long Distance, Predators, lopsided again, Gwenom, badass cover right there, The Life of Gwen Stacy, Volume 6, and the most recent one that I own, which is Spider-Gwen Ghost Spider, which is a tie-in to Spider-Geddon. This was pretty good. I don't yet own Volume 2 of Ghost Spider. That recently did come out, but I haven't had a chance to pick it up yet. Next up is Ben Reilly, the Scarlet Spider, Volume 1, Back in the Hood. I like Ben Reilly as a character. I think his costume is really cool looking. For those of you who don't know, Ben Reilly is a clone of Peter Parker. He first appeared in the Clone Saga storyline, which many people don't like, especially the 90s version of it, because there was 2 Clone Sagas, one in the 70s and one in the 90s. And the one in the 90s basically proposed the idea that the Peter Parker that we've known all these years wasn't actually the original Peter Parker, the real Peter Parker, and Ben Reilly was actually real Peter Parker. And as you can imagine, it pissed a lot of Spider-Man fans off, and I can understand. I mean, I wasn't alive in the 90s, but I probably would have been pissed over it. Yeah, but nowadays it's obviously Peter Parker is the real one and Ben Reilly is the clone. Volume 2, Death is Sting. Volume 3, The Slinger's Return. Volume 4, Damnation. And Volume 5, the most recent one, Deal with the Devil. Alright, we're now on to the second last shelf. So next up is the classic 60s Spider-Man stuff. The Amazing Spider-Man Great Power. I love these Epic collections. But the thing about them is they're not published in chronological order. So you will get like for example, with the Spider-Man ones, you have volume 1 to 5, but 5 and 6 hasn't come out yet. They actually recently announced 5. I think it's coming out in February next year. So that's good, but 6 is still not out. 7 is out. 8 to 14 is not out. And then they have 15, no 16, 17 to 22. And then they have 25 coming out next year, but they don't have 23 or 24. So yeah, they're not published in chronological order, but that's okay because it gives them more of a broad, space. It gives them more of a... For example, if people don't like the Stan Lee and Steve Ditko era, they can read the Michelini and McFarlane era of the 80s and 90s, and I think that's a good system for these books. Volume 2 is Great Responsibility. Volume 3 is Spider-Man No More. Volume 4 is The Goblin Lives. Next up is Volume 7, The Goblin's Last Stand. Volume 15, Ghosts of the Past. Volume 17, Kraven's Last Hunt. One of the best Spider-Man stories. Volume 18, Venom. Volume 19, Assassination. Volume 20, Cosmic Adventures, which I didn't really like. Volume 21, Return of the Sinister Six. And Volume 22, Round Robin. Next up, I have the 90s Clone Saga books. Yes, what I was talking about with Ben Reilly. This is Book 1, Book 2, Book 3, Book 4, and Book 5. There's actually 11 books to this, but the next 6 I actually don't have because they are expensive as shit. Once again, they're out of print and they're very hard to find. And some of them go for like $1,000, and I'm like, no, obviously. So, yeah, unfortunately, I can't finish the story. I will never be able to finish the Clone Saga. Not that I really want to, because this is one of the worst Spider-Man stories ever. Spider-Man The Next Chapter, Volume 1. This is the first time they rebooted the series. Rebooted the numbering, at least. Volume 2 and Volume 3. Spider-Man Revenge of the Green Goblin. The Straczynski run, which Volume 1 is coming home. This run is one of the best run in all of Spider-Man comics. This is this is hands down one of, probably the top 10 Spider-Man books of all time. Specifically this one especially, because Straczynski just brought everything back to regular Spider-Man, and he did some stuff that that the series should have done a long time ago. In this book, spoiler alert, but Aunt May discovers Peter's identity, and it's a really great issue. It's called The Conversation, and it's actually in Volume 2. Aunt May and Peter just talk about how he's Spider-Man, and they have the conversation, and it's written very well. This and Volume 2 are easily some of the best Spider-Man stories ever. Here's Volume 2 and Volume 3. Now, the next collections I have are actually Volume 2 again, but it's collects after Volume 3. It's kind of confusing, but there's two ways to collect this Krasinski run. There's these little thin books, and then there's thicker books, so that's why next is Volume 2. Here is Volume 2, or Book 2, another great one. Volume 3, which has the controversial Sins Past storyline, one of the worst Spider-Man stories ever told. It's basically it's revealed that Gwen Stacy had sex with Norman Osborn, and they had kids with the Goblin formula, and because of the Goblin formula, they grew up to be, like older adults already, and yeah, Spider-Man fights them, and he learns about all this, and it is a terrible story. I'm not even sure, I don't know if this is canon or not. It's that bad, oh my god, this was awful. Book 4, or Volume 4. Next up is The Road to Civil War. Next up is The Amazing Spider-Man Civil War. Next is Peter Parker's Spider-Man Civil War. I don't like Civil War for Spider-Man, like just specifically for Spider-Man's part in it, because he is just completely out of character. He sides with Tony Stark, even though for the majority of his career as Spider-Man, he hated Tony Stark. So it's really weird. I mean, he's completely out of character. Next up is Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man by Peter David, the complete collection. This is another one of the best Spider-Man books. It's just one of the best runs in Spider-Man, and I would highly recommend it. Again, love that cover. Next up is Spider-Man Back in Black. This is one of my personal favorite Spider-Man stories, just because of how brutal it is. I mean, Spider-Man beats the shit out of the Kingpin. And, yeah, it's very, very entertaining. Next is One More Day, and this is one of the most controversial Spider-Man stories, and infamous because this is the one, for those of you who don't know, Mephisto, who is the devil, erases Peter and Mary Jane's marriage from history. It's an exchange for Aunt May's life, and it's absolutely terrible. This is one of the worst decisions they've ever made in Spider-Man comics history. This is just awful. So after that garbage, we got Brand New Day, which starts in a world where he and Mary Jane never married, and it's pretty bad. Next up, Volume 2, Volume 3, and Volume 4. Next up is Red-Headed Stranger, Return of the Black Cat, a very sexual-looking cover, Gauntlet Volume 1, Electro and Sandman. By the way, this was probably one of the only good things to come out of Brand New Day. Volume 2, Rhino and Mysterio. Volume 3, Vulture and Morbius. Juggernaut Volume 4, and the Gauntlet Volume 5 is Lizard. And the Gauntlet was leading up to this, Grim Hunt, which I absolutely hate. I haven't heard anyone talk about this in a negative light. I seem to be the only one who doesn't like this, just because I think Peter Parker is completely out of character. He tries to kill Kraven, which goes completely against what he stands for, and it's so poorly done. Next up is One Moment in Time. This tells the story of what really happened, like continuity-wise, after Mephisto erased the marriage. And, yeah, it's pretty terrible. Origin of the Species. Next up is the Big Time Era. This is Volume 1. This is when Dan Slott took over as head writer, and a lot of Spider-Man fans don't like Dan Slott, and it's understandable because he basically turned Spider-Man into Tony Stark, and you'll see that it's not now, but you'll see it later that, yeah, he's not even Spider-Man anymore, and it's just terrible. Big Time Volume 2, Volume 3, and Volume 4. Dying Wish is next, which is the part where Peter Parker dies and he switches minds with Doc Ock. Some of you might have heard of this story. And Doc Ock becomes Spider-Man, and he calls himself the Superior Spider-Man. And I do have the Superior Spider-Man, you'll be seeing that in a bit. Next is Peter Parker, the One and Only. This is just a series of short stories that, some of them are good. I don't like a lot of them, but some of them are good. Actually, most of them are good. But yeah, there's writing on this book because when I ordered it, it just came with writing on it, and it's really pissed me off. Alright, so we're now on the last shelf, and to start off is Ultimate Spider-Man Volume 1, Power and Responsibility, Ultimate Spider-Man Learning Curve, Ultimate Spider-Man Volume 3, Double Trouble, Volume 4, Legacy, Volume 5, Public Scrutiny, Volume 6, Venom, Volume 7, Irresponsible, Volume 8, Cats and Kings, Volume 9, Ultimate 6, Volume 10, Hollywood, Volume 11, Carnage, Volume 12, Superstars, Volume 13, Hobgoblin, Volume 14, Warriors, 15, Silver Sable, 16, Deadpool, Volume 17, The Clone Saga, no relation to the other Clone Saga, Volume 18, Ultimate Knights, Volume 19, Death of a Goblin, Volume 20, and His Amazing Friends, Volume 21, War of the Symbiotes, and Volume 22, Ultimatum, and that includes the first series of Ultimate Spider-Man, which is my personal favorite series of Ultimate Spider-Man. There's a lot of great stories in Ultimate Spider-Man. I don't think it's as good as the main 616 universe, but yeah, it's still pretty good. I mean, Clone Saga and probably Power and Responsibility are my two favorites. Next is Ultimatum Requiem, which is a aftermath of the first Ultimate Spider-Man series. Ultimate Spider-Man, the new series, or not the new series, but the second series. This is the World According to Peter Parker. Volume 2, Chameleons. Volume 3, Death of Spider-Man Prelude. Volume 4, Death of Spider-Man. And the Death of Spider-Man is probably one of the best Spider-Man stories ever written. It is fantastic. Avengers vs. New Ultimates, Death of Spider-Man. I don't read Avengers, Ultimates, whatever, but I got this because it shows where the Avengers were during Spider-Man's death. Death of Spider-Man Fallout. This is the aftermath of Spider-Man's death. Here's the Miles Morales start, Ultimate Comics Spider-Man Volume 1. I'm not a big fan of Miles' character. He feels like basically the same character as Peter Parker. He's just a replacement, and I don't really like his character. It's just, there's nothing interesting about him. He's just another Spider-Man. Volume 2, Volume 3, Spider-Man, which was a crossover between the Ultimate Universe and the main universe, and it was pretty good. Volume 4, which was actually pretty good. Volume 5, which was actually pretty good. Cataclysm, the Ultimate's Last Stand, which is where Galactus comes, and yeah. All New Ultimates, Power for Power, and Volume 2, No Gods, No Masters. Miles Morales, The Ultimate Spider-Man, Revival, and Volume 2, Revelations, which was, these two books were pretty bad. Ultimate End is where the Ultimate Universe gets destroyed and Miles comes to the 616 universe. And Spider-Man, Volume 1, which is another Miles Morales series. Volume 2, and here's the crossover they did with Spider-Gwen sitting in a tree, and this was absolute garbage. Volume 3, Spider-Man 2, which was extremely disappointing to me. It wasn't nearly as good as the first one. And Volume 4. And the last Miles Morales book I have is Volume 1 of the new Miles Morales Spider-Man series, Straight Out of Brooklyn. This one was actually surprisingly pretty good. And here's the Superior Spider-Man Volume 1, My Own Worst Enemy. Volume 2, A Troubled Mind. Volume 3, No Escape. Volume 4, Necessary Evil. Superior Venom, Volume 5. And Volume 6, A Goblin Nation, when Peter gets back in his own body. And they started a new Superior Spider-Man series just recently. This is Volume 1, Full Auto. I haven't read it yet, and I don't know what to expect. Here's Volume 1 of Amazing again, The Parker Luck, where Peter Parker's back in his body. Here's a mini-series that Dan Slott wrote. It's called Learning to Crawl. It's a retelling of Spider-Man's origin, and for the most part, it's pretty good. Here's Edge of Spider-Verse, with a whole bunch of different spider people and what their stories are. And here's the big book, Spider-Verse, which collects basically everything tied into Spider-Verse, and it's a fun event, but it's not that great of a story. Volume 4, Graveyard Shift, and Volume 5, Spiral. This was a mini-series that went on during the Secret Wars event, and it's The Amazing Spider-Man Renew Your Vows, where Peter and Mary Jane are married again in a alternate universe and have a daughter named Annie Parker. And she's not as good as Mayday from the Spider-Girl books. They then got their own series. This is Volume 1, Brawl in the Family. Volume 2, The Venom Experiment, where Mary Jane gets the symbiote. 8 years later, where Annie is now going to high school. Volume 4, the final volume, Are You Okay, Annie?, which was complete garbage. Then they rebooted Spider-Man again with a new series. This is Volume 4, new series, but it's Volume 1 of Volume 4. It's a little bit confusing, but yeah. This is where I was talking about that Peter basically turns into Tony Stark, and this is a pretty horrible series. And just to let you know, the next books all take place in chronological order. Here's a mini-series, Amazing Grace. Here's Volume 1 of the Spider-Man Deadpool series, Isn't It Bromatic? Here's Volume 2 of The Amazing Spider-Man. Volume 2 of Spider-Man Deadpool side pieces. A Spider-Man Civil War II tie-in. Volume 3 of Spider-Man Deadpool, Itsy Bitsy. A short series with Spider-Man and Silk, The Spider-Fly Effect, which was actually pretty good. Volume 3 of The Amazing Spider-Man. Volume 4 of Spider-Man Deadpool, Serious Business. And Volume 4 of The Amazing Spider-Man. Next up is the Clone Conspiracy event, where Ben Reilly came back. And yeah, this is one of the better Dan Slott Spider-Man stories. Volume 5 of Spider-Man Deadpool. Volume 6 of Amazing Spider-Man. Volume 1 of the rebooted Spectacular Spider-Man series. Volume 7 of Amazing. Volume 2 of Spectacular. The Venom Incorporated crossover between the Spider-Man and Venom books. Volume 8 of Amazing Spider-Man. Volume 6 of Spider-Man Deadpool. Volume 3 is Spectacular, which was pretty good. And Volume 9 of Amazing Spider-Man, Dan Slott's last Spider-Man story, which was actually pretty good. Spectacular Volume 4, Volume 7 of Spider-Man Deadpool, and then the most recent reboot of Spider-Man, again, they rebooted Amazing. This is Volume 1, Back to Basics. It's now written by Nick Spencer. Edge of Spider-Geddon, which was not that great. Spider-Geddon, the actual event, featuring Spider-Man PS4. Yeah, I love Spider-Man PS4. Spider-Geddon Covered Ops, which was a tie-in series. And Spectacular Volume 5, which was another Spider-Geddon tie-in. This was probably the best part. Well, okay. The Spider-Gwen Ghost Spider book you saw earlier was the best part of Spider-Geddon. This is another good part. Volume 2 of Amazing, Friends and Foes. Volume 8 of Spider-Man Deadpool. Volume 3 of Amazing, Lifetime Achievement. The last Spider-Man Deadpool, Volume 9, Event Pool, which was pretty good. Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, the new rebooted series. Again, they keep rebooting Spider-Man. It's getting kind of ridiculous. This first volume is really great, though. And this is the final book I have to show you, The Amazing Spider-Man Hunted, which is Volume 4 of Nick Spencer's series. And I have yet to read this. Alright, and that's it. That is the entirety of my bookshelf. I just finished putting all the books back. Yeah, that's all the books I own. Sorry if I kind of rambled, and this video is extremely long. This is probably one of the longest videos I've ever made. And, yeah. So, I do have more videos coming, I do have a... Oop, bad lighting. I do have a book coming in the mail this Tuesday, and it is a Venom Lethal Protector novel, kind of like those novels, and, yeah. It's coming Tuesday, and I plan on... I'm gonna read that next, and I'm actually reading it for an upcoming video. No, I'm not reviewing it, but it is gonna be for a video. And I am not going to tell you guys what it is yet. I am working on it right now. But yeah, my next video might be the review of Guts. I don't have the book yet, but I plan on getting it soon. But yeah, that might be my next video, or the one I can't tell you about yet might be my next video. So yeah, look out for that. I don't know if you guys want me to do like a movie shelf video. It's not as big as the books, so it won't take me as long, but that's probably one of my last plans for now, because I have a lot of video ideas and plans, and the movie shelf is probably one of the last ideas, that's on my mind. So, but if you guys really want me to do it, then I will. Yeah, so sorry this video was so long. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And yeah, stay tuned for more videos. Have yourselves a good night.